Okay, so because of the weather, we'll just give a couple more minutes for people to get here and get settled. How are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
Not bad. Okay. Oh, okay. But you're okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We'll talk. We'll talk at break. Okay. Because I'm just about to get started. All right. So as people are trickling in, we might as well get rolling because we've got a lot to talk about today. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about privacy on the internet, and it's very significant because things have changed so dramatically over the last few years. The biggest thing, as I'm pointing out here, is Castle has been launched in 2015, and basically what it did was the anticipation of Castle as corporations were readying themselves to move forward was unbelievable. I was in one organization where we had to re-examine everything that we were doing because we didn't want to be put in breach of Castle. And we're going to go over what some things were, some of the penalties and some of the fines that are associated with a breach of Castle. So we're going to talk about that today. Don't forget some important dates that we should be remembering. November 15th is your last day to withdraw without academic penalty. Now, what that means is if you have a course where you're just not confident that you're going to succeed successfully, then you have the opportunity to withdraw from that course, and what it'll show on your report card is a W, on your transcript is a WD rather than an actual mark. Now, if you feel that you're marginal right now, where in any of your courses, if you're kind of on the bubble, talk to your instructors before you drop the course, especially with core courses, because what's going to end up happening is you're going to have to retake that course again. So you're in week 10, see if you can't figure out a strategy for success. And
What if it's a gen ed? Most programs require a gen ed.
It's the same thing. You can withdraw without academic penalty.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't recommend it at all, if at all possible. Talk to your instructor.
I mean, like, would you have to take another G?
Yes. Yeah. So you can either retake that course or find a different course that's more complementary to what you're looking to do. With this one, I'm going to suggest that if you're considering withdrawing without a penalty, speak to me first, because I'm looking at it and I've got a really solid core of students who you've worked hard for 10 weeks. And if you withdraw, you basically you might as well have not even done anything in those 10 weeks. So talk to me. Let's see if we can develop a strategy, because the last thing I want you to do is make a rash decision and then have you regret it in come time where all your friends are graduating and you have to take that makeup course. Or next semester you're working in a local situation. So talk to me about it. Give me a chance to see if we can develop a strategy. Now, November 21st, so next week, we've got I was pausing for the picture. November 21st, we've got the corporate internet marketing assignment. So that's where we're doing the presentations. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the presentations from last week so that you can prepare for this week, for next week's presentation. November 28th, we're doing test number 2, which is worth 5% of your final grade. So it's very similar to test number 1. There's not a great deal of questions. And because it's right near the end of this semester, I'm going to be testing you on what we've done in the second half. So test 1 was what we did on the first half. Test 2 is kind of what we've done up to date with the second half. And then the final exam, which is on December 12th, will be worth, I believe it's 20% of our final or 25% of our final grade. And that's going to cover everything that we do so far from September 1st, from the first week right through. And then, of course, don't forget the big one, final assignment presentations. This is where you get an opportunity to structure stuff in front of everybody. You've been working all semester long on your website, so a lot of you have been doing a really good job on it. One of the things I can't stress enough, I recognize this isn't a web design class, so don't worry if it's not up to a professional standard, but certainly make sure that all the technical aspects are in place.
Is that the part 4 of this major assignment?
Yes, part 4. All right, we've just got a couple more students coming in. We'll give them a chance to get settled. So are there any questions about anything that we've talked about so far today? So we've just gone over some of your now the social media assignments. For the most part, they were done very, very well. I was impressed with the presentations. You guys really struck me as a group that it's either hit or miss when you're talking about presentations, whether this is it or kind of fights. Okay, so collectively we did a very, very good job. A couple things that really impressed me about the presentations were that your level of insight into your assignments, when you were working with the specific organizations, you were able to speak to their strategies. You were able to talk about what they did. Some of the things that impressed me was your use of statistics, because as we're moving forward in social media marketing, one of the significant roles of the marketer is going to be doing analytics, studying what works, what doesn't, how it's working, who's viewing it, who's clicking on these ads. So these are all very important tools for us to learn. The second thing is, when you were up in front of the class, you guys were very comfortable, which tells me that there was some nerves and a little bit of jitteriness, but that's okay. It tells me that you guys are very comfortable, A, in a group, and B, within this group, which is very significant because we still have 2 more assignments to go where we're standing in front of the class. So all in all, it was done very, very well. Were there any questions on the social media assignments? Okay. And now my PowerPoint is stalled. Okay, so today, like I mentioned, we're talking about internet privacy. And this quote is really jumped out at me. The internet, my fickle friend, my two-faced enemy, what would life be like without you? Where else can I be anonymously anyone and yet have no anonymity at all? An intriguing quotation. Anyone have a comment on it? What's the author, is the author accurate? What are they trying to say here? Have we lost our anonymity on the internet? What do you think? Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, kind of we lost our anonymity because of Facebook, people can just look up your names.
Sure. So now more and more, our private lives are no longer our private lives. When you send out a resume and a company is considering you for a position, this is why we had the social media exercise. The first thing that the hiring manager is going to do is look you up. They're going to do a Google search on you, and more often than not, and this is something that I would recommend that you do as an exercise, is look your name up on the internet. See if you can find yourself, if you haven't already. What it's going to tell is what they're going to see about you. For example, when I do a search for me, I have a pig farmer in Kansas who uses the same name as me, and he's got the URL keithconnell.com. So he's ranking a little bit higher than I am, and he's got a few other things. So I'm competing with that, but certainly does that affect my performance with an interview? No, it wouldn't, because a hiring manager would look and go, okay, yeah, that's not the same guy.
But if you've got pictures or posts up on the internet where you look and you go, oh, I really shouldn't have posted that, or I really shouldn't have said that, then I would recommend you try to scrub your social media as much as possible. Now, the nice thing is that your website's going to complement what you're doing with social media. So as you're scrubbing the social media, you're also boosting your ranking a little bit with your website. So you're overcoming some of your challenges. So Nick feels that we've lost our anonymity. Does anyone feel that we're still okay, or is everyone in agreement with that? Vanessa?
Well, the fact that Facebook is trying to help with the fact that they're like, you can set it to privacy, but at the same time, it's not that private. People can still find you.
Okay, so even though you set your settings to private on Facebook, people are still able to find you on the internet, like through Facebook. Okay, interesting. It's well, and I think that you're not alone, because I think it frustrates a lot of people. But the good news is millennials, as we've discussed, are not using Facebook as much anymore. You're using Snapchat and Instagram. Nick, were you going to add to that, or were you okay? Okay, I thought your hand came up. Okay, so now the other thing that you've got to take into consideration is when you make a post, or if you put something up on your websites and you delete it, does it go away? No? Why doesn't it go away? We talked about this earlier this semester. It's cached by Google. So if I look at a page on my website and I look and go, oh, you know what? I really shouldn't have said that. That's inaccurate. Or I'd like to change that page. And I take it down. Google has still cached that. So it's still going to return that result to my end user, which for me, I work very hard at making sure that I present a very clean image on the internet, because that's my profession. But you know, for students, and my son is an example of this, where he's not so focused on presenting that professional edge yet. So he's kind of just putting posts up about Donald Trump, about Trudeau and things like that, which that's very important to be truthful. But by the same token, you've got to kind of filter now, because we don't have that privacy anymore. Now, in the past, historically, what we would do is if we had a feeling about Donald Trump, we would discuss it among our family or our friends, and that's where it would stay, because there was no grand stage. Now the internet's there, and there is a grand stage. So we've got to be aware that our privacy and what our thoughts are now becoming public consumption. So have organizations gone too far with data mining and invading our privacy? What do you think? This row, you guys have been sitting here quietly, so I'm going to look to you. What do you think? Have organizations have gone too far with data mining? Now, okay, let me rephrase. You guys understand the phrase data mining? Anything that you do on the internet is basically data. So an organization could scrape your website, scrape your social media, and mine your data that you're putting up there. So do you feel that we've gone too far? You think so? Are you sure, or you sounded a little unsure? Okay, so you feel that we have gone. Why is that? Okay, so that's an interesting point then. So you feel that we've gone too far because everyone's got their own privacy.
Like some big organizations, they steal the information of other companies still. So we call that data mining or something else?
No, that would be called theft. So when you're talking about, for example, with the iCloud breach, where someone broke in and stole everyone's information, yeah, that's a breach. That's not data mining. That's really, really unethical. Nick, did you want to add?
It's not that different from stalking.
Okay, interesting. Why is it not that different from stalking? First off, define stalking.
Like trying to get info for someone or following someone just to learn about them, not necessarily because you want to be their friend or anything.
Okay, so you've got a person of interest that you check on the internet, to see what their social media is, their tweets are, et cetera, et cetera. So that's stalking. Okay, so by doing that, then that would be your definition. So we're almost stalker-esque at times. Now, here's something that I'm going to pose to you. If we're voluntarily posting this information up on the internet, are we making ourselves susceptible to stalking or encouraging people to look us up?
A bit of both, I think.
Okay. So you still feel, even though we make the information public, that we have a right to that privacy of information.
Yeah.
So how would we achieve that?
Not sure.
It's difficult because, like I say, the internet, as soon as you put it up there, the world can see what you've posted. And as Vanessa's pointed out, even though the privacy standards are set very high for Facebook, there's still ways around it. So you have this challenge of, do I post this because I lose my privacy, but I want to post it because I have a right to post it?
I think it depends on the intent of the person who's looking it up.
Okay, so it's intent of the person. That's actually, that's a really interesting point. So what do you mean by that?
Like if like an employer looking up your social media to try to find a reason to fire you,
Yeah.
or if someone's trying to look for drama or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've given two examples, one professional, one personal.
Yeah.
Do you think that organizations go on the internet to look for reasons to fire their employees?
Possibly.
Okay.
They also hire.
Oh, okay, hiring, definitely. I would definitely agree. Personally, I think that organizations don't go on that proverbial witch hunt where they're looking for a reason to fire you. If they're not satisfied with your performance at on the job, then they'll utilize that lack of performance to make changes. However, in that situation that we've spoke of earlier this year, where the Ontario Hydro employee was acting out in public and he went right across social media, he forced the employer's hands. He basically said, you've got to act now based on my behavior. You tell me what your response is going to be like. So in one sense, he encouraged them to dig up that dirt on him. But by the same token, he certainly did have the right to perform however he wanted in public off duty. But now that case kind of brought up something that was really, really interesting, which is that we're no longer off duty because of the internet, because of social media. So when you're sitting at the local festival, whatever that might be, and you might happen to have a drink, we'll say, and someone takes a picture of it and your employer deems that as inappropriate, if it's on the internet, now your private lives are no longer private. So we've come up with some interesting challenges over the last few years. So CASL, what it means and what it means to companies and individuals. So everyone's had a chance to look at the assignment that I gave you, or the reading for the week? Excellent. I'm seeing some nodding heads, some people not trying to make eye contact, which is okay because we're going to go through the reading. We're going to talk about it. But does anyone want to offer an opinion of what CASL is before I go into my tirade?
Is that the place where the Queen lives?
Yes, absolutely. Windsor Castle. So that would be exactly what we're talking. No, we're not really talking about that. It's CASL. Brianna, you'd mentioned that you'd done it. Do you have any opinions or ideas on what CASL might be? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so we're talking about CASL, and I was just asking what you thought the CASL might CASL be, and how does it affect organizations or people? Or would you just plead the fifth at this point? Okay, you're pleading the fifth? Okay, that's fair. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to add about CASL before I start? All right, I'm going to enlighten you. Oh, Capital Area Soccer League. That's Google. Yeah, no, okay, that's not CASL. Okay, so I'll explain to you what CASL is. CASL is the Canadian Anti-Spam Legislation, CASL. So yes, there is probably a soccer league called CASL, but the one we're talking about is the anti-spam legislation. And what it did was, as a society, about 7, 8 years ago, we were getting bombarded with unwanted emails. So people were sending emails that we didn't ask for. We were getting attacks on our computers when you were to click on a link, for example, on an email, and it would install tracking software. And the tracking software is very, very ingenious because it can be 1 pixel and it'll be installed on your computer. You'd never know it was there unless you were looking for it specifically. And what that tracking software did was several things. First, it tracked where you were going. So it knew what your habits were on the internet. It knew what your habits were on the computer. And why would a company want to know what your habits are, A, on the internet and B, on the computer? Vanessa.
To figure out what you want. So essentially, if you're looking at flights to Vancouver, it'll just pop up with things to do in Vancouver or something like that.
So it gives them an opportunity to upsell.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? Why, if I were an organization, why would I want to know what you were doing on the internet? Because statistics sell. So if I can trap what Stacy or Brianna are doing on the internet, I can sell that to prospective advertisers. So my organization may not be the Vancouver sell-off events. That might not be what we do. But what we do is what's called data mining. We're taking all that information in from all of the computers that we've installed, unlawfully installed this software on, and we're sending it over to the organizations that set up the sell-off vacations and things like that. I'm not saying sell-off vacations participates in that. I'm just using that example because of Vanessa. Okay, so what we're doing there is one way. Now, there's something else that's even more dubious that organizations were doing, and that's keystroke monitoring. So once they install this on your computer, they can now tell you exactly what you've typed. Where do you see a problem with that? If an organization knows exactly what you've typed. Think about your activities online. Vanessa?
Well, if an organization knows exactly what you typed, what if you type something that's not actually legal and then the government comes after you for it?
Okay.
But then if it was just a mistake that you didn't actually intend to do that,
Yeah.
you're still seen as something bad in the government's eyes.
Absolutely. Okay, Nick?
There's a big difference between typing something and actually posting it.
Okay. But now these organizations, though, are actually monitoring what you're typing, even if it's in Microsoft Word. So whether you post it or not, these organizations are getting there. They're getting the information. Now, on Vanessa's point, there was an episode of The Big Bang Theory where Sheldon didn't understand that you couldn't search on Craigslist for weapons-grade plutonium. And apparently when you do, the Secret Service contacts your mother. So it was a bit of a joke, but absolutely, whatever you're doing online is being tracked. Like whether it be by Google or government organizations. Now, government organizations don't typically track what you're doing online unless there's a problem. Then they can go back. But there's one more significant thing that these organizations are doing that make it really uncomfortable as the end user, which is if I'm tracking your keystrokes, do I not get access to all of your passwords, all of your account information, all of your bank cards, all of your credit cards? So now I've got a level of information on you that's unprecedented. Because if you think about it, if you're just typing, say, for example, in an email, you're thinking, okay, this is just going between Vanessa and Akla. No one's going to see it. And all of a sudden, this organization fully understands everything that you're saying. Now there's a problem. Now, Google has started getting into the AI a lot more with their emails. And this is an interesting fact that I would send out an email to somebody they'd reply, and then I would look on my cell phone and I would have an automated reply to what they're saying. Now, that's kind of unnerving, because if you look at it and you go, Google is now, and I'll put in quotation marks, reading my emails and giving me recommended responses. And the responses are very, very accurate to what's being said. Nick?
You have to confirm it before it gets sent, though?
Oh, yeah. No, it's just a button, so you can click it. So it's a one-click response, basically. I'm going to say that it's intended to be a little bit more of a convenience factor. Now, one thing that you've got to understand with Google, though, any of their convenience factors or security measures are not done in error. For example, a couple years ago with the CAPTCHA codes. Now, do you guys remember when the CAPTCHA codes were street addresses, where you had to look and confirm what the street address was before you could get into a website or send a form? Interesting fact was those pictures were part of Google's Street Map website or their campaign. So they couldn't confirm what those street addresses were based on the picture. So what they did was they pushed it up to CAPTCHA, and what CAPTCHA did was say, confirm what this picture says. And if the majority of the people said that that street number was 123, then Google would enter that as 123. So we were actually, by doing CAPTCHA codes, doing Google's work. So it's interesting, some of the things, but the most important thing is that Castle came in and they said, enough is enough. We can't have organizations just sending out emails. Like there was a point where I was getting probably about 50 or 60 spam emails a day. And it gets frustrating, but all you could do was delete them because there wasn't anything in place. Yes, there were some, there was anti-spam organizations. One of them was called Spam House, and that's was based in Germany, so it was HAUS. And they were a watchdog organization where if you had a lot of complaints about your company, they could actually act on it. And where they were more of a watchdog were for broadcast email services. Now, in 2006, I worked for a company up here in Barrie called One Shopping Cart. And one of the things that we did was offer these broadcast mail services and autoresponders and things along those lines. And we had customers upwards of lists of 10 million people on their list. Now, how do you suppose these people got on their list? Like 10 million people were on their list. How do you suppose they built such a strong list?
I would almost say they emailed one person and then got all of their contacts.
Excellent. So Trojan viruses. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And a Trojan is something that you open, and then you guys have heard the Greek, I believe it's a Greek mythology, with the Trojan horse, where during the war, the Trojans gave a gift to their opposition of this beautiful horse. It was huge. So the enemy brought it into their fort, and they set it out for overnight, and they were going to deal with it in the morning. But inside that Trojan horse were Trojan soldiers. They finally breached the compound, and now the Trojan soldiers were in the compound. That's exactly what a Trojan horse does, is it's a gift or an email or something along those lines that's in the guise of one thing, and when you open it, now you've got them giving access to all of it. So yes, Vanessa, absolutely, you would scrape the email names. How else do you think an organization could do it? Over 10 million names. One way is legitimately, which would be through newsletter signups. So people saying, yeah, you know what, I'd like to receive your information. Another way is purchasing the leads. And what would happen is there'd be organizations that were constantly scraping the internet. And when I'm talking about scraping, you've got bots and programs that are going onto each website looking for all the email addresses. If you remember when I was talking about your websites, try to avoid putting your email address on because they're scraping it. And I'll explain what that does by you putting your email address on in a couple minutes. So organizations were actually purchasing these and sending out these lists. So now there's no control. So the Canadian government said no more. Now the other interesting thing was this was also extended to text messaging, which I'm going to go into in a minute as well. So you've got your email as well as your text messaging. And we've talked about the installing of the viruses. And what Castle also does is, and as I mentioned about scraping, it protects us as users or as computer system owners from a program or other organizations scraping our system for personal information. And that's what I was talking about a couple minutes ago with the keyloggers, for example, so that they've got full access to everything that you do online. So there's 3 governing bodies that enforce Castle. The first one is the CRTC. And if you've not heard that phrase before, that's the Canadian Radio and Telecommunications Corporation. They oversee television stations, radio stations, and now what they've got into as well is overseeing internet policies. So they're overseeing the basis of it, as well as the Competition Bureau. Now the Competition Bureau at that level is actually more of an organization where they're filing lawsuits and implementing fines for any company that's infracting on that. And then finally, you've got the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. They oversee everything to do with Castle. So how does this affect us as a marketer? So now we've got to take off the end user hat because, yes, it's frustrating when we're getting all these emails. It's irritating when we get text messages that we don't want. It's unnerving when we understand that these organizations are getting our personal information. But as a marketer now, when we put on that marketing hat, now it changes everything that we do. As I was mentioning when it was coming in, the level of nervousness of organizations was just unparalleled because there's major fines associated with an infraction to Castle. So what we'd have to do now is we'd have to move towards changing all of our sign-up forms. So for example, we would in the past we would have the check mark filled in for I authorize them to receive send me emails. Now, according to Castle, based on what I'm saying up here, is that we can no longer do that. So which one is correct? Are we allowed to have that one with the check mark or that one?
Bottom one.
The bottom one? Right. Ding, 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 ding. Now, why is that though? Why? That seems like it's an odd request for the government to say, you must not have that check mark already indicated. Why do you suppose?
Because it's pretty much, well, it is enticing you to do it because it's already there.
Yeah.
But added to the fact that it already looks like it's checked, so some people will think that they've already actually signed up for it.
Okay.
When they didn't want to.
Okay. Very good. Now I heard someone say something over here.
Sometimes they don't want the email from the person and they are already getting it, so they will get it.
Okay, so sometimes if it's checked, then they didn't want it in the first place, but they're going to get it. Nick, you had something?
A lot of times I think they're probably hoping that you don't notice that it's checked.
Okay.
Just assume that that means the process is complete.
Okay. So you're all very accurate. And the technical term is that's implied consent. Because I have not authorized that check mark. You've done it for me. So at that point, if that checkbox is automatically registered as being checked, if I don't uncheck it, now all of a sudden I'm receiving those emails and I didn't want to. Okay, so implied consent. Now the other thing is, this isn't just for online forms anymore. This is everything that we're doing, and I'll talk about that as well in a second. Now, broadcast email campaigns. Now, companies like AWeber, the OneShoppingCart.com, Constant Contact, MailChimp, they're all what's called a broadcast email service. So what it does is you can build this list of 50, 60, 300, 10 million people, and you can send that email out one time to all the people. Now, that's all well and good, but the really nice thing is that it can be formatted in HTML. And you all received these emails where you open it and you go, wow, is that ever nice? Because you got pictures in there, you got the header in, you've got some body tags, etc. So you've got this opportunity, but now organizations are no longer permitting us as marketers to auto import these massive lists. So if I were to go out and buy 1 million names from an organization, I can no longer import that to the service provider because the end user has not given consent to the organization to send emails. Now, other things that an organization's doing is, the other thing that the organizations are doing is what's called a double opt-in, all right, to protect themselves. And these are all phrases that if you do any online marketing, you're going to have to become very familiar with because, again, the CASL is significant within our privacy laws. So this is what's called an opt-in. Once I check that box, that's a single opt-in. That's okay under CASL. But what it's still doing is it's creating a situation where companies are a little more liable still. So what companies are now doing, and I think that if you think back to your online activities, you'll realize this is, say for example, you sign up for a newsletter, and you put the check mark. You're authorizing me to send it. But what I'm now doing is I'm sending you another email saying, please click this link to confirm that you definitely want to receive this email. So by you checking the box, that's the single opt-in. By now sending a link out, that's the double opt-in. Everyone understand? Okay, cool. All right. So question for you as a group, does this mean then we can no longer email our customers? Vanessa's vehemently saying no. Why does it not mean that?
Because it means you can email your customers if they tell you you can.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean you can email all of your customers.
Okay.
If they don't give you.
Okay. So in what Vanessa's saying is it means that the ones that have consented, we can send emails to. Our customers that have not consented, we can't. Basically is what you're saying, right, Vanessa? Anyone have another opinion? Does it mean that we can no longer email our customers? Here's something that's interesting that you may not have considered. We're allowed to email our existing customers as much as we want under CASL. Nick?
But you just can't do an automatic system.
No, you can do it with an automatic system. But I'll go over some of the requirements. But the reason that we can, say for example, I'm Amazon, and Vanessa, you've made a purchase off of me. Now I can send you emails as much as I like. Well, within reason. Like obviously you'd probably want to unsubscribe if I were really inundating you. But because there's now a pre-existing relationship, you being the customer, you're authorizing me automatically because you've made purchases with me to send you emails on sales and things like that. Now, organizations are still so nervous about the liability of CASL that they're still saying, hey, do you mind if we send you emails? Even though there's a pre-existing condition. Now, based on what I'm saying, how can we as a marketer, because you're going to have your bosses come up to you and say, okay, I want you to oversee this. How can we prove a relationship is in place? So we have to say that there's that person, Vanessa, has a relationship with Amazon. How do we prove that? With an ID? Okay, so like an ID number? Okay, certainly. So every customer, and that's what's called a unique ID. So absolutely. Nick, first?
Purchase of receipts.
Purchase or so receipts? Yep. Vanessa? Subscriptions. So these are things now, absolutely, and those are the three that I was thinking about. These are now things that we as marketers have to consider to make sure are in place so that we're protected against CASL. It sounds like it's this big bad organization, and trust me when I say this, it is. Invoices, inquiries, permission to communicate, all things that would help out. So anyone want to take a stab, because I said that this is a big bad organization. Does anyone want to take a stab at how much we're talking about for breaching the legislation for fines? Vanessa?
Would it be at least
Okay, so Vanessa says $1 million. Who says that's too much? Nick, you say it's too much? How much do you think? feel like I'm auctioning right now. So 500,000. Okay, does anyone else have an opinion or a guess? Vanessa, you were bang on. You did your homework. Up to $1 million fine. Now, here's the big thing. That's per infraction. So if I've got a 1 million name list and I've got, say, 75 complaints under Castle, my organization could be fined up to $75 million. If I have 10,000 complaints, that's way too many zeros for my pay grade. You'd have to use the calculator, but that's massive, massive. So this is why organizations are a little unnerved by this whole legislation. Now, does it mean that every infraction is going to get $1 million? No, it's not, because the government's not going to go in and say, for example, Vanessa, you get a complaint issued to you. They're going to do an investigation, and if you're found, you're an individual, they're not going to probably go after the $1 million. That's more for the corporations. You'd probably get about $10,000, $15,000 fine per infraction. Now, I keep stressing this about the per infraction because $1 million, if you're say IBM, well, $1 million, that's doable. That's no problem. We can pay the $1 million to get this sale out. But if 15 or 20 people complain, all of a sudden it's no longer worth it to them. And that's how the government is doing it. And as consumers, we have the ability to file complaints. And if you want to get off of an email list really, 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 really quickly, send them a response saying, please remove me from your mailing list immediately, or I'll file a complaint with Castle. And chances are extremely good you will never be heard from again. Now, that's from organizations. Now, if you're trying to break up with your significant other, I don't think it's going to be that easy. And the reason is, okay, actually, it's an interesting one, but the people have tried this. Why is it not that easy? Say, for example, if somebody's trying to break up with their significant other, to file a complaint under Castle. Yeah.
Because you gave them your.
Okay, you've.
Specifically, and you're in an intimate relationship that's doesn't have anything to do with an organization.
But people can have the same complaints filed against them. So if I'm sending out thousands and thousands of emails for a Christmas card to people I've never met before, they could, in theory, file a complaint under Castle. But you hit the nail on the head, though. If you go back a couple slides, you've established a pre-existing relationship. So relationships don't always have to be financial. They can be inquiries. They can be romantic, or whatever the case is. So a personal complaint against another person, more often than not, is difficult to prove. And what you're finding is more organizations, and as a web developer, I come across this constantly, where I'm being told that they work for a large organization overseas where they have 250 people programming websites constantly, and they can get me on the internet, like front page of the internet, for a very cheap price. Now, I would love to file a complaint about them, but what you find is that they're all what's called burner email addresses. So they register this email address, and it'll be under Gmail, it'll be under Live, it'll be under all sorts of different things that are just burners, and no one really knows where they're coming from unless you actually do the research. So yeah, a lot of money at stake for a breach of the deal. So as marketers, anyone have any ideas then? So we've talked a lot about this stuff. What can we do as marketers to protect our employers? Because again, I almost guarantee this. If you touch any online asset with your company, your boss is inevitably going to ask about what you can do to protect them from Castle. Any ideas? Let's see. So we can employ best-in-class procedures for information gathering. So best-in-class would be the double opt-in system that I spoke about. So someone says, yes, I'd like to receive more information about your company. They click the button, it opens the information, the contact form where they can fill out their information, and that checkbox is unchecked. So they have to physically check it. They press submit, that's great. Then an autoresponder kicks in, whereby you'll receive a second email saying, are you sure you really want to receive the stuff from us? Yes, now I've got a paper trail protecting me. or at trade shows, and I talked about this a couple minutes ago, or at least I alluded to it, that we're no longer having to just assume that people, because they fill out say for example, a ballot at a trade show, or have you guys ever filled out ballots when you're walking through, say for example, you've got all those booths on orientation day, and you're filling out ballots to win stuff? Have you guys filled out ballots before? You've never filled out ballots? Oh, they're a lot of fun. Nick, you have? Have you noticed that they're starting to add the consent form, the consent checkbox now? Okay, have a look, because more often than not they are. Because what ballots are, companies aren't just interested in giving you free things. They don't just say, hey, you know what? I really want to just give out this t-shirt to somebody. What they're doing is they're exchanging that t-shirt to one person in exchange for 200, 300 different people filling out those ballots. So now I have the contact information, and I'm building a list of 200, 300 people. As long as they've checked that checkbox, then I can send them emails, even on paper, especially on paper, because what you've got to do then is you can at least establish that there was intent, implied consent, or actually not implied, explicit consent to receiving these emails. A lot of information here, eh? It's good. Trust me, as I pointed out, it's very valuable. You want to stay current on the legislation. Anyone that has any insight of political at all, the first thing that I'm going to tell you is it's constantly changing. So when you think that you finally got the castle nailed down, they're going to add some things, change some things. Technology changes. Review the mailing list frequently. Now, the other one, audit your website and online activities. Make sure that you're actually following CASL. These are all things, if you follow, will almost guarantee that your boss will not get fined. So this is a significant list that you probably will see in a few minutes, or not a few minutes, a few weeks. Hint, hint. Okay, so pop quiz. And this is the audience participation point. So get your thinking caps on. True or false? CASL only pertains to online activities of gathering data.
False.
False. Let's see. All methods of collecting data contribute to an organization's level of exposure to CASL. So that's the print forms that I was talking about. That's the implied consent forms. That's the all sorts of things. So absolutely, it involves every piece of information gathering that you can possibly think of. Next one. CASL also reaches how we format our broadcast emails. True or false? Don't say it yet. Let's give someone else a chance. Anyone else? Oh, this side, you guys have been so quiet today. So what do you think? It's either true or false. You say true? Who said true? Oh, you said true. Okay. All right. So does anyone disagree that it also reaches out to how we format and broadcast emails? Let's see. It's false. Well, actually, no, that's true. I'm going to say it's true because it does reach how we format. So you are right. So 1,000,000 points for you. So as an organization, we cannot send emails from other email addresses. So say, for example, and I go back to that one where I'm getting constantly, we can get your website up on front page of Google for next to nothing, or we do website design. Now, under the truest sense of CASL, that is something that's punishable. But because what they're doing is they're sending it via a burner email address, I can't do anything as a consumer. Also, not related to us, and we must also provide full contact information at the foot of every compliant email. Your address, your organization name, your phone number, and the most important one, true or false? Every broadcast email must contain an unsubscribe link to be compliant. This side, you guys haven't said anything yet. You're saying false? So it does not have to have an unsubscribe link. Does anyone disagree? No. Oh, you're disagreeing with yourself. Okay, so it's true then.
Yeah.
Okay. So absolutely. That's the other significant part about being compliant is you have to give the consumer an opportunity to unsubscribe from the program. True or false, Georgian College sending us emails is a breach of CASEL because we did not authorize it. False. Nick?
False, because we applied with our own consent.
Okay, so you've applied, but did you check that box? Bet you don't remember. My guess is there wasn't a box, but how is Georgia? So you were saying it's false. So why do you feel it's false then? Why do you feel that it's not illegal for Georgian to send us emails that are unsolicited? Okay.
They are like campus, so they are right from the students.
Okay, so we're customers. Vanessa, did I just steal your thunder? Pre-existing relationship. And that's something that's really, really significant. So let's see. It is false because by enrolling at Georgian, you've entered into a business relationship with the college, which allows the college to communicate freely. Now, I believe if you check Georgian College's emails, there'll probably be an unsubscribe link at the bottom of it. Probably not such a good idea as the consumer of Georgian College information to unsubscribe from those lists because it may end up blocking your professor or your instructor's ability to communicate with you via email. Because if you're blocked, then I'm not sure exactly what their system's like, but I know that the systems I've developed, if somebody says, I don't want to be receiving emails from you, none of our organization can send out emails. So I don't recommend clicking that unsubscribe link, but definitely it is false. True or false, Georgian College should still include an opt-out link in all emails to us. Okay, so Vanessa says it's true. Anyone say it's false, Georgian College shouldn't? Nope, absolutely true. It's not mandatory. Okay, now this is where it gets a little confusing because it isn't mandatory that Georgian College has to include the unsubscribed list because you've got a pre-existing relationship. But it is good customer service because if we're sending out to the student body 15, 20 emails a day based on the fact that we've just created the new relationship with Lakehead, well, all of a sudden people are going to start getting frustrated and it becomes a customer service issue. True or false? CASEL only affects computer users and their email. This one's an interesting one.
False.
False? Okay, Nick says false. Vanessa, you're formulating the answer. Okay, so you're saying false? Okay, so Vanessa's saying false because it's printed stuff as well. Nick?
False.
Okay. Anyone else have a dissenting view that they think that it's true? Everyone's agreeing it's false? Here's one that's interesting. About I'd say about 2 years before CASEL was launched, organizations were developing text messaging apps, whereby if you walked within, say, 500 meters of Walmart, Walmart would send you a text on specials. So you'd be getting this text that says, oh, you know, dog food's on sale, or whatever the case might be. Or McDonald's has their Big Mac dollar days, where you can get a Big Mac for $1. Oh, wow, that's great. But we didn't consent to those. And under CASEL, that's no longer legal. Now, here's an interesting fact, though. And if you consider, and I can attest to this as an instructor at Georgian College, what type of communication are you more likely to read instantly? Text message or email? Text. Text. You're 70% more likely to read a text message than you are an email. And that's at the corporate level. I assure you, on the personal level, it's probably closer to 90, 95%. Because based on some of my communication, I'm not saying with this group, but with students in general, I'll send them an email out and 3 weeks later they're getting back to me. Tells me you probably haven't installed email even on your phone, some of you. I'm not saying all of you because some of you are pretty quick. So it does involve cell phones. It does involve print material, but it doesn't involve junk mail. And that's the frustrating part because we didn't opt in for this, But because it's not specifically addressed to us, they can send us all this junk mail in snail mail. All right. So what I'm going to do is, we've had a lot of information here. Over the break, I want you to look back at all your previous emails, or some of your previous emails that aren't Castle compliant. Discuss with your partner, if you have a partner, why you feel that they're not compliant. Okay? And then when we come back, we're going to talk about compliancy and why it's not compliant, etc. Okay, so why don't we take a 10-minute break? We will see you back here at about 12 after. Okay? Go get some caffeine. No, I'll watch.